Businesses like Canva push this narrative that everybody is a creative, and I fundamentally don't believe that. It's a deep level of skill and understanding, years of experience to build taste to be a creative. If you're a consumer and an educated consumer, why do you pay for a brand? Why do you pay for a logo? What it is that these businesses have thought really, really intelligently about who they are and, more importantly, who they're not. And they've done that consistently. I think creative is important today because it is an expression of brand. And yes, I believe that every single company around the globe has to be a media company today. If you are a creative today, you are doing the job because it is a passion. You absolutely love it. And the reality is that you can't really be good at everything, and you can't really compete everywhere.
Shane Hegde, welcome to Change Order.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Excited to chat a little bit. I feel like you are at the intersection of probably two of the biggest trends right now in the world, which is AI and creative. So to kick off, is AI going to ruin the creative industry?
Well, I think it's important first to talk about what we mean when we use the word creative. When I use that word, I think about a brand designer, a graphic designer, a photographer, a videographer, an illustrator, someone who is in the craft of making a thing. And I think for the last number of years, we have mischaracterized the word. To their credit, businesses like Canva push this narrative that everybody is a creative. And I fundamentally don't believe that. It's the same reason why I don't believe that I'm a chef, even though I like cooking, or that Katy Perry is an astronaut. I think that, it's a deep level of skill and understanding, years of experience to build taste to be a creative. And being a creative is this, crazy, wild experience of being able to connect things that are unnatural, that wouldn't make sense together until you see it. And then you're like, oh my God, this is incredible and feels so right. And so is AI going to be able to fit together things that logically don't fit together? Maybe when we reach AGI at some point, or SGI. I don't think so today. And I think that, from my perspective, the humanity, the unknown that a creative is able to structure into our world is something that I don't think will ever be lost because it's illogical.
I guess one thing that I think about when it comes to creative, and an analogy would be, as you mentioned, cooking. And I remember I met a sushi chef one time, and I was obsessed with making sushi at that point in time.
I feel like everybody in venture has some omakase story.
Some sort of omakase story, or just obsession. I go down these rabbit holes. And one of the rabbit holes was learning how to make sushi. And I was at an omakase, nice $75 one in the East Village. And I asked the chef if he would be willing to teach me how to make sushi. And the guy looked at me and he was great. We were drinking beers all night together, some sake, and he's like, no. And I was like, why not? And he's like, well, I had to spend 3 years in the kitchen doing nothing but making rice, just making rice. And then, you just cut the fish for a couple of years after that. And then finally you get to go to the front of the line. And after that conversation, I got home and I was thinking about it. And I was like, is that because they just want to lean in and make these guys suffer the same way that they did? Or is it because it actually is truly an art?
Yeah.
And my pushback, and the reason why I bring up that story, is making sushi to an extent is a food science. There is a way of figuring out the exact right ingredients that you need to make and the directions that you could follow, and the exact way that you need to cut the fish and then, potentially put it together. And I do wonder, you mentioned that taste. Can taste actually be extracted by AI based on all of the taste that's been aggregated on the internet today and be automated in a far better fashion?
Yeah. I guess I'm someone who believes in personalization. And I think in that regard, my taste might be different than yours, and what I want might be different than yours. And so, is a machine going to be better at automating that? Probably. I also want to be clear that I very much am an advocate for the meritocracy being created by technology, allowing creative work to be really accessible. I think that's amazing. I think it's amazing what Canva or Figma or any of these tools do. When you think about the realities of what I'm trying to say when I'm trying to defend the creative in this position, I think it comes from a place where, at the end of the day, the struggle that a creative goes through is trying to find originality. That's the task of our time, is like, how can we stand out in a world of noise? And I think that it is impossible to know how that happens and what's going to be best at doing that, whether it's going to be an LLM that's trained on everything, that knows everything about you, or someone who just has a really well-trained eye and ears and hands. And so I think that, I guess, like, I'm not here to say that machines will never do it, or machines aren't good enough, or a rice cooker isn't going to be really, really good at making rice. But what I am here to say is that the impact of creative work is what we're all searching for. It's what our company Air is trying to build, and giving time for originality, I think, is the most pressing challenge of our moment that we live in today, regardless of advancements in technology.
I think another way you can think about it, if you look at it from another analogy that's more applicable from a creative perspective than just sushi, is probably the evolution of music creation, and specifically video creation. And if you look at Netflix, what have they done? They've basically created a lot of offshoots of the things that they knew worked.
Yeah.
And music, by the way, same exact thing. I think one of the reasons why I've heard stories about the Chainsmokers taking off was they were one of the first groups that leveraged Spotify's analytics to figure out what could make a hit. And it feels to me like that is ultimately what I would call mass market creative. That's like the 80% of the market.
Yeah.
But in the next generation of companies and in the next generation of creative, you're going to need to be elite in order to stand out from the noise, because it is all going to sound and feel and look the same, in the same way that when we looked at all the Red Antler brands that got launched, in like 2015 to 18, they
totally.
You kind of knew it was Red Antler branding.
Yeah.
So I do wonder if in the next 3 to 5 years, as there's probably a 10 or 100x explosion in content, if the need of having an elite creative becomes even greater.
I mean, obviously I believe that, given what I do every day. I think that it's interesting. I was sitting yesterday and I listened to a talk from the team at Bandit Running, and they were, highlighting how, like, they very much sell a commodity today in the market. And there's so much price elasticity. And so, the question is, like, how, if you're a consumer and an educated consumer, which I would assume most consumers are today, why do you pay for a brand? Why do you pay for a logo? Why do you pay? And all of that, I would argue, is for some resonance or feeling or effect that brand has on you beyond just the commodity that you're purchasing. And I think for years we kept throwing on the word community, which is like kind of cringe. But what it is that these businesses have thought really, really intelligently about who they are, and more importantly, who they're not. And they've done that consistently. And they found a group of people who had a feeling or an itch or a frustration, and they continued to speak to that on an ongoing basis. And I think to your point, there's a growing amount of divergent perspectives and opinions. Like, the mosaic of our world today, I know it's challenging times maybe politically, but I think the mosaic of it is more colorful than it's ever been. And we can have these, like, unique opinions and perspectives. We can all have a brand that we identify with. And I think that lends an opportunity for content to be a vehicle to express that to people on an ongoing basis. So to your point, like, yes, I think creative is important today because it is an expression of brand. And yes, I believe that every single company around the globe has to be a media company today because they have to express that brand on a constant basis and storytell around it with images and videos.
And it's becoming 100x easier to do that.
Correct. To do that, to execute on that,
Yeah.
is the important, qualification off of the statement.
I completely agree. And so when you think about the role of the creative, how do you see that changing and creative teams changing in a world of AI?
I mean, the sort of like flagship thing I would say is that the job is now moving towards being a curator in more aspects than like it ever used to be. I feel like there's this really funny interview. I found it funny. I don't know, maybe I'm being mean, but it's with Rick Rubin, where they were interviewing him, and they were like, "Do you even know how to play instruments?" And he was like, "No, people just really appreciate my ears." And I think that that's becoming the job of the creative. And when you think about why, it's not just because it's easier to create, but I think it's because companies like Air, and we're not the only ones, are trying to abstract all the noise away from creatives, all the stuff, the crud that takes up time, so that they can focus on honing that taste and being curatorial with the execution of it across a growing width and depth of scale, right? Every business today is trying to increase the throughput and velocity around the content they're creating and the amount of distribution points where that content is going. And so for a creative, the job is changing in that you need to understand the dynamism around that. How much content are we creating? Where all is that going? How is it performing? Why would X work better than Z? Like, these are all dynamic questions that are forced onto an individual who I would argue, like, proudly suggests that they hate logistics.
I mean, it's this interesting world where if we zoom out and think about 3 to 5 years from now, and also between AI and the way like the human brain actually works, we like as humans to like see new things. It's like new dopamine, right? Because everything that you see the second, third, fourth, fifth time, it's not as much dopamine probably as like the first time that you got.
Yeah.
And so therefore, net new things that you can see and consume ends up creating that dopamine response, which if I think about a creative in the world today, a creative might take 3 years to make something and perfect something. It might take 6 months to create that new song or 2 years to create that new, statue, whatever it might end up being, that piece of art. And I think the best creatives today probably enjoy that process. It's one of those things where flow state is introduced by like actually having like your hands on like the keyboard or the guitar or like the paintbrush and like putting it onto the canvas. But what you just said was we're now moving into a world where you're becoming more of a curator without having a lot of that noise. Do you think that creatives need to change the way that they're thinking about doing their job? And a follow-up to that is, do you think they're going to enjoy it as much?
These are deep questions at 9:15 here. I think if you are a creative today, you are doing the job because it is a passion. You absolutely love it, and you step into a business environment, the context where you're trying to support your day-to-day. If you're not an artist, you're working at a business, and the realities of a creative's day-to-day job at a business have nothing to do actually with creating the next great thing. That's probably like 25% of their day or week. The other 75% is like it's logistics. It's like collecting a thing, sharing it, getting feedback on something, creating a new version of it, taking a thing and making it accessible in every single format you need to, finding a thing because someone doesn't know where the shoot from last year. These are all the things that are the crud that take up their day-to-day. So to your first question of like, Do they need to change how they work? Businesses need to change how they approach creative work and the expectations that they put on creatives. Because today, what's happening is we're having this exponential scale in the amount of content as a company that we want to create and we want to distribute. And we're just throwing that onto manual work, onto a team that's flat at best. And we're expecting them to support it with manual work. So I think that businesses need to change how they approach creative work. It's why I wake up every day and go to work with 50 people in New York City. Do I think they're going to like it as much? Yeah, like we're moving to a world which is the heart of it. It's an opportunity to do the stuff that's magical. You know, it's deep thought. You know, like for the first time, we're going to be able to give creatives the opportunity to sit there like an engineer has been able to do for the last couple of years and do deep work. There's going to be incredible outcomes that come out of that, regardless of whether it takes 5 minutes to generate an idea for a TikTok or 3 years to, come up with some new campaign idea. I don't think it really matters. But the cool thing that, from my perspective, when we think about this world and the opportunity it has, is like, imagine what they could do with their time back.
And in a way, if I were to pull out some things that you just said, it does feel like there's a difference between artists, meaning like music and, people who make other art forms, and business-oriented creatives, because the folks that go into the business world end up doing what you're talking about, which is they get stuck in the minutia of, oh, I need to get the CMOs sign off on this thing, and I need to make sure that I get feedback from all these people, and there's like a lot more bureaucracy, and they might even need to collaborate a lot more with folks internally than they want to, and that gives them energy. And the reality is the thing that gives them energy is probably just creating.
Yeah.
Do you think, though, that creative teams shrink?
Let's be clear about what's happening in business today at large. In business, and let's what do I know other than enterprise software? So I'm going to narrow the perspective to just that. In enterprise software for the last 25 years, you've been seeing a consistent trend where ARR per FTE, revenue per employee, has been going up.
Including yours.
Including my own. And when you think about how that journey has materialized, enterprise software used to be Chads and Brads running around to offices selling some hard drive to you, some disk to you that you would install in your computers. And it was expensive to do that. And, average revenue per employee 25 years ago, 30 years ago was like $50,000. Then we had this shift to what we have seen in the last 10-ish, 20-ish years around cloud-based software purchasing and the deployment of that software through the cloud. And what was really cool is you saw it 5x, right? You saw ARR per revenue per employee go up to about $250,000. I'm speaking about gross averages in public SaaS companies. In the last 2 years, you're seeing AI native businesses that sure have tailwinds because of market acceleration, who are generating $1-3 million in ARR per FTE, and that's only continuing to go up. Now, why is that? Yes, it might be because they've hit a market opportunity at the right time, but it's also because how they operationalize their business is fundamentally different than the average company. And you're seeing, whether it's the latest news from the team at Shopify and their thoughts on how they progress, or how I am operating and hiring into our business post Series B, how I'm approaching this is radically different because of this new reality. So are we going to have less creatives working at a business tomorrow than we do today? Probably, but we're probably going to have less finance people and less revenue people and less engineers. So, I'm not here to disagree that there's this macro trend that's emerging. I think I will say this, there's two ways to think about the word creative. It's people who are creative in their thinking and people who I'm characterizing as creatives, people who make images and videos.
Yeah, no, I really love that way of thinking. And when I kind of think about the future of creative and the change and the evolution, I think there's probably a lot of fear out there that the amount of jobs for creatives are going to go down. And there's a lot of fear that the amount of jobs for software engineers are going to go down too. It's equal. But earlier you already said there's going to be an explosion of content. You know, it's probably, it might actually like 1,000x or 10,000x at this rate. And people, every company actually will have to become a media company in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And if you do believe that, the amount of demand for creatives will explode. I do not believe fundamentally that the CEOs or the founders of a small business in Toledo, Ohio are going to want to use an AI tool every day in the middle of their busy day to go create their own content curated by AI and then posting it on the internet. Like, the reality is that if you look at the history of business, small businesses have used agencies and services and consultants for many things that they just don't want to do.
Yeah.
And it feels like a lot of the content creation and the creative that comes out of their business in order to attract customers historically has been one of those things and will continue to be one of those things. It's just a question of like the evolution of the model.
Yeah.
And as humans, I think we need to evolve the way that we think. And over the last 12 months, I remember I spoke to a number of folks about captions, which I'm sure you guys, you're familiar with captions. And one of the conversations I had with an investor was like, can you just like walk me through like what you thought was really interesting about captions? And they're like, well, under the hood, there's actually a lot of people overseas who are using captions to offer services to businesses at rates that were already cheap, but now are even cheaper.
Yeah.
And their output is now 5 to 10x more.
Totally.
And I think that people can't lose track of that, which is if the demand goes up significantly, the supply is going to go up. It might not need to go up linearly anymore, but it will absolutely go up. And it's just a question of like, how much are we seeing the multiple of demand increase, and then what is the weighted fraction or probability of the supply having to increase accordingly?
Yeah. Okay.
So what role is air going to play in the future of this creative industry?
Yeah. In every area of the enterprise where there's been a scaled and complex data problem, a system of record has emerged to structure the chaos. Why are systems of record required? They're required because of two reasons. One, there's an execution of work that's fragmented that needs to be centralized. And two, centralizing gives you insight to drive decision-making on an ongoing basis. We can go across the last 25 years from Salesforce to HubSpot, ServiceNow, GitHub, depending on which vertical in the organization you want to talk about, there's always been this system of record. There's never been one in creative work. Why? Because 10 years ago, creative work was like maybe once a quarter, a month, we would make a thing and put it somewhere. We've talked for 25 minutes about how that's not the case today. When you think about scaling creative work and scaling the output of a creative, or even trying to automate it with AI in the second 15 minutes of our conversation, with all of that stuff, fragmentation makes it challenging because there's a lack of structure to build from. In AI, there's the classic ism of garbage in, garbage out. And so a prerequisite to this world of automation and this world of scale we're trying to get to is a system of record. Fundamentally, that's what we're doing at Air. We are building, at the most basic level, we're building a tool to help businesses manage all of their images and videos. So it's infrastructure, it's asset management. And then it's a workflow tool. On a day-to-day basis, creatives are living in our product. Our top 10% of users spend 11 hours a week inside of our tool.
What are they doing during the 11 hours?
They are automating all of the workflow processes, like how they share content, how they collect content from influencers, how they give feedback, how assets get distributed to their CMS or their ads manager. All of that is orchestrated in our product. And so they're checking in on how that's going, making sure that the right workflow is going to the right person at the right place, getting all of the, sort of like asks organized and structured in a clean place for the organization, balancing that work across all the agencies and freelancers and clients that they might work with. I think what's fascinating about creative work today is that, and what's cool is like, I feel like our business is living it out. There's two things. One, every business is becoming a media company, but then the second thing is that there's a larger and larger share of the organization that's participating in the creative process. This is a thing that I believed for a while that I don't think the market understood. And that's my fault as a founder and not characterizing that, whether it's to investors or to people around the business. If you look at an organization today, and let's look at each of those vectors. Take our business. No industry takes up more than 12% of revenue. We work with hospitality businesses and retail brands. Everybody assumes we work with a bunch of D2C businesses for sure. We work with sports and hospitality organizations. We also work with nonprofits and government institutions and healthcare companies. And there's a few mom and pop restaurants and there's church groups in Toledo, Ohio that use our product. And so we're proving out this reality that every organization is trying to figure out the scale of content. And then the second reality that I love in looking at our own data for our business is that 15% of our customers have more users on air than full-time employees. Think about that for a minute, right? We're talking about a form of work that used to be like, maybe we do this once a quarter, once a month. And now 15% of our customers have more users on air than full-time employees. Our largest workspace has 2,500 people in it. And when you think about that, you think about how this form of data is now central to how a business is run. And yes, these people in the corner who are kind of kooky, that wear funny clothes and like try to find nuance that we call creatives are at the heart of that. And then yes, naturally it's the marketing team. But then it's sales and product and partnerships and the operations team, and then your freelance creatives and your agency partners and your clients. There's so many people participating in the creative process today. I try my best to be someone who really studies his market and understands it. And one of the things that I have found to be the most salient analysis of where creative work is going, to their credit, is actually Adobe's annual report. And if you read it over the course, download the last 10 and look at the differences each December in those annual reports. And what's fascinating is what's happened is Adobe, and I don't know why, I don't know. I'm sure there's some analyst who's talking about this, but they have stated that their core customer has changed.
To what?
It's no longer a creative professional. They believe that there's about 84 million of those around the globe. It's what they call a visual communicator. It's big business speak, fine. But it is someone who works with images and videos every day during the work week. And they believe there's 900 million of those people across the globe, knowledge workers who every single day need to work with images and videos. And when you think about, first of all, they believe there's a way larger TAM in the latter than the former. Second of all, if you break down the tree branches of that addressable market, there's two sides to it that are really compelling for Adobe. One side is template-driven design work. Canva, Adobe Firefly, right? All of the tools that like are the hot, AI, let's generate some things, let's get it quickly. Figma just launched their Canva competitor yesterday, templates, all that stuff. Because this is a meritocracy, democracy, what's happening around creative work, which again is beautiful and amazing, and I champion it. The other half of that is, how the hell are we going to get all these people to work together? It's collaboration and content workflow. And I would argue today that there is no private, faster growing, compelling, deep product doing that than Air. And that's exciting. It's challenging. I know that there's going to be more people. There's a ton of startups. Like, it's getting fuller and fuller, and it makes the challenge of executing on it greater and greater. But I don't know, man. I guess I'm so bullish on what we do because we never have to build product two. Just going deeper and wider in collaboration and content workflow, which I can call creative ops, I can call a system of record for creative work, I can do all this stuff. But at the end of the day, it's just helping people execute on day-to-day workflows around a specific form of data, images and videos, helping them collect, approve, and share that stuff repeatably, automate that, and then managing all of the data and infrastructure and metadata that comes with that. And from my perspective, the uniqueness is in positioning. I believe that positioning wins in business. If you assume that execution is fairly normalized across every company. And that's why this business schooly word around strategy becomes really, really critical as businesses continue to grow, because the only thing that matters is a strategy that's influencing the positioning. And the positioning is something that is foundationally important to who has the right to win in a given category.
Can we debate this live?
Yeah, please.
You said positioning, and it sounds like what you also mean is positioning in the market, not just to your end customers. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if your positioning in the value chain is where it is today, my perception is, and maybe I'm wrong, you guys have a cornered resource at the moment, which is access to all the files. You own the files.
Correct. Yeah.
You own the data. You own the context.
And the metadata.
And
the context.
And the metadata.
Yeah.
Which enables and unlocks the ability to create individualized LLMs for each of your customers.
Yeah.
If you believe that AI will make it 100 times easier to build product, you're not going to be at 70 to 80% as good as Figma or any of the other tools.
Yeah.
You will be at 100%.
Yeah.
And you will not have one product being Figma. You will have Figma, you will have Adobe, you will have every product.
Yeah.
And if you know, because you have the context of what the products are that your users are using, you can create individualized, personalized experiences that already match the current workflow. And you can bundle those products in and counter position. And counter positioning, for those who don't know, is you do something that if your competitor were to do it, they would be cannibalizing their own business. So they'd be basically killing themselves.
Yeah.
And so what we're seeing across many markets is the company that owns the context, the company that is at the bottom of the stack, is able to give away the product that the person who sits on top of them is selling for free.
Yeah. Can I respond to that?
I want to hear it. Yeah. You don't need to do it, by the way, or publicly say you're going to do it. But I'm curious if it changes.
Let me say this.
Anything.
I think an ism in tech, purported sometimes by folks in venture, is that we need to fight against each other in a given category. And one of the things that I've loved about Shopify's approach is they've been very supportive of the community around how you deploy an e-commerce product online.
Historically,
yes. And yes, are they slowly cannibalizing more and more parts of that and consolidating? Sure. But they are fairly first principles around what they do and what they don't. They very much explored, should we do payments? And then they're like, you know what? No, we're not going to be better. We're not going to be 70% as good as Stripe. So what are we doing? It's a waste of time. And I think that this is not critical to you. I think in venture, a lot of what happens is individuals believe that the pace of an idea to the quality of an output can be unbelievably high and dynamic. And the reality, at least from my perspective, is that you can't really be good at everything.
Agreed.
And you can't really compete everywhere. And there has to be some fundamental constraint that guides your decision-making around who you are and who you're not, and where you're best in class and where you're not. And air is never going to be, I will say this until you can hold me to this 10 years from now when we're sitting down again, air is never going to be the best 0-to-1 content creation tool. It's not. We're not going to lean into that. There's going to be other people that make better decisions around that. But we will be the place where you can go from 1 to infinity.
What's the difference between those two?
The difference between those two is that 0-to-1 requires unknown, it requires customization, or it requires exploration. And 1 to infinity, there's at least some context to start making decisions. You keep referencing how we own the metadata. Great. We need that to drive and optimize a decision. Think about I've been trying my best to explore with the, lovables and bolts and replets because there's all this craze around it. I'm sitting there and I'm like prompting to my heart's content to like make a design, make some product design. And what do I want to get in there and be like, no, just tweak this, change that. And yes, will that get better and easier and faster? For sure. But the DNA of crossing that bridge, of translating that value, I would argue creation tools are going to be really good at. And I think that like a business like us, when you think, what is the mission of AIR? The mission of AIR is to increase the impact of creative work. How does AIR think about impact? AIR defines impact as the reach, quality, effect, efficiency, and scale of creative work. And so those are the vectors that I can change for a customer. And I'm limiting myself to that. And so the customer is going to go elsewhere for other things. And I recognize that. Now, does that mean that, in that reality, in the success case that you speak to, like, yeah, could I cannibalize your CDN because you could grab a link on AIR and pump it into your CMS? Yeah, like we're doing that today. Like customers can take assets from AIR, embed that directly into their email marketing tool or their Shopify account, and they don't need their CDN. I'm not charging them for that. Could I charge them for that in the future? Sure, for sure, yes. But like, I'm doing that because I believe that given my position, my 75% solution, it's pretty good. I argue potentially better for the customer. And so, like, yes, AI is changing everything. Yes, these things are going to be easier. But I don't think our business is going to be thinking about certain problems, which is where I would argue we need to be really dynamic about partnering.
So let's talk about the two categories that Shopify has not cannibalized.
Yeah.
Are one, payments, right?
Yeah.
And two is email. Mm-hmm. And on the payment side, they used their weight. They threw around their purchasing power to negotiate an incredibly good deal with Stripe. And therefore, they don't need to take on all of the expenses of, running a payments company, which, by the way, running a payments company is very, very hard. It's very complex. It's not just software. It is a lot of risk. There is like a lot of regulatory things. It's just very complex. Email, it's easy from the outside to be like, well, then why didn't Shopify just do email?
Yeah.
The answer, I think, is incentives. They own, if you go on the cap table of Klaviyo, a good amount of Klaviyo.
Yeah.
So why are they going to disrupt Klaviyo? Like, is it actually going to introduce that much more revenue?
Yeah.
No, like they can now, focus on other things. But when Toby made that investment in Klaviyo, everything that you're saying is true. Like, it would have taken years to build a good, high quality product. And to be clear, I am not disagreeing that it is very hard and has been very hard to build world-class products.
Yeah.
It has been this like moment where building those products and VCs, I still believe, and I've run two companies now, like VCs always thought it was easier to do things than it actually was.
Yeah.
And before I did believe that that was the case. And right now, I just think we are moving into an era. This is at least something that I believe now is like of speed chess, where product builds have such velocity to them that if you don't think about your positioning in the market, then you might all of a sudden get left behind. And so, and I don't know, by the way, your market, your market 100 times better than me. But I think the two questions, and really maybe one question, and then I'll give you a different analogy here. The one question I would ask myself is, what incentives do the other companies have to come into my lane?
Yeah.
What risk in, or threat in their SWOT analysis are they writing on the board that might end up pushing them deeper into the stack to grab more context.
Yeah.
And the reason I bring that up is because we're investors in a company, and they sit at the bottom of the stack for financial institutions. I'm not going to share which one it is, but we knew of a company that was 2 stages ahead of us from a capital raising perspective. And we knew that they had partnered with a company that was a competitor to us, and we knew how much they were selling their product for.
Yeah.
And I just asked the founder in a board meeting, hey, like, have you ever explored launching that product and making a bundle out of it? And he's like, not yet, but let me come back to you in a week and I'll share a, roadmap with you and how long it would take to actually build, and then we can talk about it.
Yeah.
And he did. This company is doing like 15 million of ARR. They've raised a bunch of money.
Yeah.
And he's like, so it'd only take us 3 months to match feature for feature.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, what is holding us back then from rolling it out and giving it away for free?
Yeah.
And he's like, nothing. I actually think it's just time.
Yeah.
And so I do wonder now if the idea of open versus closed ecosystems, and I don't actually have a strong perspective on it yet, but I do think that we will see more companies taking a Steve Jobs-like approach to creating closed ecosystems for their products around their context versus open ecosystem approaches. 1, because of the gross profit pools, but 2, because of the threats that might come from the people who are currently sitting on top of them, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think the perspective is sound there. Like I guess what I believe is like there's the classic trilemma of speed, quality, and cost, right? And given a lot of this advancement, we're inverting speed, is your point, changing cost. And so can quality be higher because of that? Can we keep indexing on quality at like rates we never have before? Let's take that, let's park it, and then let's look at our business as an example. Say we're managing like 10 petabytes of data for tens of thousands of users that are logging in every day and accessing a working file. Like we have to support a TIFF, a raw asset. We have to support a PNG. We have to transcode all these assets on the fly and deliver it to you at like world-class speeds. We have to beat Dropbox and Google Drive in speed tests. We have to layer on all this great client-side work on top of that. We have to support all of this at like a really healthy margin to exist as an enterprise software company. We have to allow that data to be accessible through APIs. We have to, it's a live-in product, right? So you have to have a desktop app that's doing local to cloud sync. There's 4 companies in the globe really that do that today: Google Drive, Dropbox, Box, and Air. Come on in. The water's warm. By all means, go through the journey of trying to dig and deepen your moat in that same way. I would argue it's no different than payments. It's no different than shipping, which Shopify famously got into and then got out of. It's a really expensive transaction for them. The nice thing about being in the place we are is that for the end consumer, if they want to shop, which they should, and look elsewhere, it's really hard to get the core tenets of what we're doing right. And I think there's this rush in the market today to like, okay, you can cancel all this stuff. We can do this. You can pop to there. And then when you get in the thing, which is what a creative does, a creative wants to be, they're like, okay, cute. Your little like, demo environment you set up for me. Like, I'm just going to use this thing and see what happens. And then, this sort of like mask comes off and it's like, does it solve the problem for me we talked about it for 45 minutes now, the velocity, the width of this scope of the problem. And I think back always, and if anything, I really, really respect great product organizations and product teams. It's so hard to build a great software product. And it's not hard to build a software product, a great software product. And Figma famously had $0 in revenue for 8 years. And it was like, you can look back in the, I don't know if Elon's deleted it, but like in the histories of Twitter about how people are like, It's a cool idea, but like it doesn't do this and then it doesn't do that. And they methodically, incrementally made it better. And Envision was like sitting in New York, making great ads, blowing past $100 million in revenue. And they were like, we're just going to get to the right solution. There's a famous ism in that I like that I've stolen about X even over Y. And it's like a paradigm for thinking about like what you prioritize as a business. And for our business, it's product even over business. Build the right product. Go through the journey of the building blocks and the fundamental truths to deliver the user experience. And I think in our category, it's really hard to do that. I'm not saying that doesn't mean people can't or they won't or that it's impossible. It's just going to take a lot of time and money.
I mean, I think your defensive position is the best position to be in, to be clear. One last question or point on this, and then I want to shift the topic for a second. But I mean, you're in the weeds way more than I am with the engineers. I don't know, what percentage of your engineering team is using AI products now?
100%.
Okay. What percentage of lines of code do you think are written with AI?
20?
20? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think like Satya just came out and said like 30%. And some companies are saying like 80 or 90.
Yeah.
I think Zuck just said like he thinks in the next 2 years, 90% of code will be written by AI.
It's interesting that well, let me I think there's what's happening is we're hearing this sort of like polar ends of the spectrum. We're hearing a person that runs one of the largest software companies in the world with a really deep code base that's specializing a system with more resources than many nation states to automate what they're doing. And then we're talking about like the 22-year-old grifters on the internet launching AI products and getting to like $10 million in ARR and doing this like 996 working style, which like sick, honestly, like
Pretty wild
and cool and honestly inspiring, but like, come on, kids, you know, like let's. But anyway, we can go on a tangent on that if you want. Those two, yeah, they're gonna get to 80% for sure, because one doesn't care about scale, doesn't matter, and let's see if that holds for them, or if churn starts to develop and then they like have some big outages or something breaks and they don't know how to fix it. That's where the challenge is going to come. And then on the other side of the spectrum, like, yeah, it's just infinite resources. So I think in the middle is where you have the like less than 80% today. And that's the challenging problem we're all trying to figure out how we can increase and improve.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And it's harder to operationalize, which I think is like the story around AI, by the way, in general. If you have 10 engineers today and you think 3 years into the future, how much do you think their output is going to be increased? By like what factor?
We at Air are thinking about how we can, since the beginning of the year, post Series B, the internal drive has been, and the mantra has been, how can we double the output? Double the output is 2xing the value you create on a per employee basis. And so every employee is thinking about this. We talk about it every 2 weeks. We have a team of 2 people. They're called, it's like a Bolt organization is what we call it. And their job is to drive automations in every area of the business and to inspire the team to take hold of those automations and start optimizing their own. And so fundamentally, our North Star metric around this, to trace our story back, is ARR per FTE. Because we think that's a pragmatic way of thinking about it. It's shaping our hiring plan. We're hiring 60 people, and we're going to like stay there until we've doubled our ARR per FTE. And I think that it's like, I guess I believe in a world where constraint breeds creativity. And I think that, you know, for us, like, I think every side of the business is sort of my fundamental point here, can definitely 2x the output with the existing value of what's in the market in the next 12 months.
And if you see like the world going at the speed that it is today, like, I mean, clearly no one's going to hold you to this, but in like 3 years, we talking 5x, do you think the speed is, or is it 10x?
Well, you know, these 22-year-olds, I'm watching their stories about how it plays out at Mercor and Cursor and insert here other named startups. I'm learning from them. I
Yeah.
have to, and I think that I definitely think it only goes up. The physics of enterprise software is changing. There's 3 simple rules to building an enterprise software company. Traditionally, you sell the cost of acquiring a customer should be less than the annual contract. Simple rule. What is the translation of that in enterprise software speak? Is like CAC payback should be less than 12 months. Your product should be 5 times the cost of making it. Translation enterprise software speak, gross margin being about 80%. And then every year, your customers should be spending 20% more. Translation enterprise software speak, 120% NDR. That was the income statement of a successful enterprise software business. What's changing is not those truths. What's changing is where the expenses are deployed to get to those truths. It used to be, let's hire a bunch of people and forward deploy those people on R&D to be able to keep this machine turning. Now it's, let's buy and spend money on a bunch of tools and systems to be able to do that. So all we're doing is moving money from OpEx to COGS, which is why, and again, I don't know if this is true or not true. These are rumors on the streets. I'm sorry to the Cursor team if this is wrong, but allegedly they're a negative gross margin business. And they're at 60 people or something doing allegedly $100 million in revenue. They've changed some of the math, but it's the same business. And I think in the market today, private market, which is the only thing I can speak to, is we're still all price and growth. So market's yeah, grow, rip, do it. Negative gross margin, great. The team is small. ARR per FTE is great. These things change. 2 years ago, David Sachs and the crew, the whole thing was burn multiple. Burn multiple has to be this thing. Great. That's markets. And as private founders, what's cool is the private markets are training you for the public markets. And in the private markets, every 18 months, there's some change in a metric, and then you got to optimize your business around it because you got to fundraise every 12 to 18 months. You got to accommodate for that. In the public markets, that's only going to be furthered and continued. I keep trying to watch public market. I'm trying to grow up. We're not a build stage startup now. We're a growth stage startup, which is training ground to try to get to a publicly traded business. If I can succeed with this business with my co-founder Tyler, ambition is to go public by 2031, 32. That's why you raise a large Series B. It's to do that and go on that journey. And public markets software CEOs, I have to keep adding that context. Many of them love the public markets because it is the cleanest mirror ever. It's 20 people. Think about it's 20 people who get paid to give you feedback. All these analysts who are sitting there, their job is to dissect everything you do and question it. And if you're a public market SaaS CEO, you've spent decades, probably years for sure, obsessing about customer feedback. And now you've got an infinite amount of people around the globe who, away from just your customers, have an opinion on your business. And they're seeing your fundamentals and they're challenging it. And in classic fashion, Shane has lost his train of thought because he started vamping. But generally speaking, I think that it's all a healthy exercise.
I want to talk about that a little bit more because I do think the evolution and growth as a CEO and studying the public markets is really important. One thing I would say about, if I were to steelman the Cursor case, and I'll quote Neil Maida, who said, great businesses can be found in broken P&Ls. You can't look at a business in its current state today that has a model like Cursor's and believe that it won't evolve over time. That's why a lot of VCs will pass, And by the way, OpenAI, you'd say the exact same thing.
100%.
But
100%.
I think a known technical cost reduction is going to come over time. I mean, just look at the cost per token. All of that is improved.
Yeah.
If the cost per token continues to go down, I imagine, and I don't know Cursor's business intimately well,
Yeah.
that will automatically improve the gross margins of the company.
Yeah.
And, we've seen it with a company that's in the more physical world and automated manufacturing side. We went from negative, 60% gross margins
Yeah.
to 55% contribution margins in
Yeah.
less than 12 months.
Totally.
And now, like, the fact of the matter that the company pushed growth so hard to prove and de-risk demand.
Yeah.
Then they had the ability to go and improve margin. Now they have the ability to go back to the demand side.
Yeah.
But you definitely need to be thoughtful about it, because if the capital markets don't say, yeah, we believe that story, you are going to run into a brick wall.
100%. Yeah. No, and let me be clear. Like, I think it's great. I think it's great that like there's flexibility now around gross margin because of the evolution of how these things will play out that end up influencing it.
Yeah. How many engineers, by the way, just to like close up on this point, how many engineers do you think Dylan had at Figma for the first 8 years?
The number I know is a Notion number, which is at 1 million users. They had, I think it was either 12 or 14 devs.
Wow. So 12 or 14 devs.
Yeah, at 1 million users
working at old school pace. And let's say it took them 8 years to build that product.
Yeah.
And then things become 5x more efficient. And, Shane is at Air, and he goes and raises a monster Series C, and they're using AI products, and they're a killer team. I think that way of looking at the world is where my head's probably moving towards.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, it did take 8 years before, and with 14 engineers.
Yeah.
Now we could do it with 2 engineers in 8 years, or we could do it in 1 year with 30 engineers.
Totally.
I'm not very good at math, but like we could go back into those numbers. And I just do think that pushing the envelope more for founders right now feels like a change of mindset that's important. And by the way, it's not just for founders, like it's for investors too.
I was just going to ask you, I didn't want to be that guy, but I was going to be like, it's going to change your business more than mine.
Oh, dude, we are changing the way that we think about things a ton. And I mean, as a board member, like I'm changing the way that I think about things daily. And I think the fact that, I worked on and launched 2 companies last year and was literally running the day-to-day and starting to build the products out, I got to see firsthand. Yeah. And it was like an, oh my God moment. Like, it is so much easier to build companies. You know, when I started an e-commerce company in 2011, Shopify was bad. Facebook was cheap. Like, you literally had to be horrible in order to not be successful. But it took a lot longer to spin up an e-commerce shop. There's a reason why e-commerce, has exploded. It's become 100 times easier to build e-commerce shops. It hasn't become 100 times easier to source products. Well, in software, you don't have to source products, you know? And so for us in the venture world, I mean, we're revisiting how we source deals. We're revisiting how we do diligence. We're revisiting how we make decisions. I mean, the other day, I got feedback from my partners on a founder. I put together a follow-up meeting agenda leveraging ChatGPT. And I shared some of the questions ahead of time and asked him to answer them async so we could go over them. I took the answers, I put it into ChatGPT, asked it to put together a framework for evaluating and scoring it, and it did. And I was like, this is probably better than 90% of the VCs that I know could have done. And it streamlines that. And then on the impact side of things, we're thinking about how can we drive more top of funnel for our portfolio companies. We made 1,000 introductions to customers last year. That was without AI, and that was with a team that started as 1 in April and ended the year at 6. We should be able to 10x that. It's on the recruiting side, the sourcing of people, those types of things. I think we need to completely retool every single part of our business. And
can I ask an existential question? Why does a 5-person team need venture money if they can achieve scale without it?
So it's a very short answer for you. It's exactly why I do wonder how much faster certain teams need to move in order to grab context and build out their product to not be the first core product, but build into the second phase of the vision, the third phase of the vision, and the fourth phase of the vision, not within 15 or 20 years like Toby did, but within 5.
Yeah. And don't you think that with the acceleration of output in the years to come, businesses will be able to do that faster?
Absolutely, which is why if I were a growth equity firm, I'd be a little nervous right now. I love the part of the stack. I mean, again, let's just go back to what we talked about. It's like, where are you playing? If you're playing at the bottom, you're more protected than if you're playing at the top. And so I think as a VC, I feel a lot more comfortable playing at the bottom for 2 reasons. One is what you just mentioned. And the second is price, I think many famous investors have said, like, when asset prices are high, you should sell. Well, there's only one way to sell, and it's investing earlier and selling to the next investor to get them to invest in the company that you backed, or eventually selling secondary. I don't think we should be selling secondary at the Series A or B right now. Like, that would be crazy. But there is an evolution of private markets that will occur in terms of both how much financing companies need to raise. That's one. And 2, I actually don't think a lot of companies are going to go public. I think you're seeing the shift of holdco structures and, RIAs, and look at the news. I mean, Thrive, GC, Lightspeed, that's all one thing. But you know who hasn't raised their hand yet and entered the arena? Blackstone, KKR, BlackRock. Like, all of a sudden, you might look at a world 5 or 10 years from now that looks completely different, where, like, if people know real estate, there's this thing called, like, the B-REIT, and it's for high net worth individuals to invest in essentially a private REIT. And those things, like those products, they never go public. They just stay private, and they get to strike the book. I think it might be quarterly, maybe it's monthly, but you can't take out all your money. But as long as there's a liquid marketplace, and I think many founders, which is probably a whole other conversation, would prefer to stay private, that will be a way that I think people will be able to exit in the future. So to shift gears here, because I think we have like maybe 15 more minutes, you mentioned Adobe's 10K and that you read through or read through their 10Ks. I also, by the way, love reading 10Ks. I love reading, initiating coverage reports, by the way. If people have never read those, not just 10Ks, they definitely should read them. Like, they're super helpful. Why did you start to like dig into those, and how has your time as a growth equity investor changed your perspective as a founder?
I think that let's talk about a moment in our business as a case study, and where it's been helpful to have been a growth equity investor versus where maybe it was more challenged to have had that background. Where it was more challenged was, my career was, I went to school and studied a mixture of computer science and finance. I dropped out of school for a bit and started a fintech business. I worked in growth equity, and then I was the chief digital officer of a television network. None of that is enterprise software. None of that was building products and distributing them to people digitally, really. And so the early innings of Air were really hard because of that. Now, the nice thing is that my co-founder's career was starting a consumer product live streaming business, selling it, becoming the head of live streaming at a publicly traded business, starting an agency that built digital products. And then, we came together, and neither of us, that we were laughing about this yesterday, Tyler and I, like, neither of us were actually building it. Neither of us were the engineers. And so that was a struggle we had early on. And I think that, like, it's really hard when neither of the co-founders is actually building the product. Now, it's not, Tyler's way more technical than I. I'm really, really bad at computer science, or was. And, like, can I hang out with engineers and think about the systems and how they're built? Sure. But, like, really bad. And Tyler at least can hop in and give feedback and shape work. And so we benefit from that. But since neither of us were building it, the early innings were really, really hard. I think now to answer your question about like what's helped, because I was a growth equity investor, we raised at 100 times revenue at the peak of the ZERP era. We closed on like January 4th, 2022. So like a week or two before the market started to turn. And we were growing at like 280%, 300% year over year. We went from $1 to $2 million in ARR in like 3 months.
Wow.
But we're burning a ton of money, right? And fast forward the time clock to like May, June of 22, and you're sitting there and you're like, there's no market. And how businesses are being valued has fundamentally changed. And the growth equity investor who was trained to do this says you need to rationalize the cost structure to a plan and then try to execute on that plan. So we cut out 70% of the OpEx out of this business, 50% headcount reduction, and a 90% cut to marketing spend.
Wow.
And after executing on that, you wake up in January of 2023 and you have a venture-backed business that had $34 million in. That's like showing a lot of signs of life, and then it's like found product market fit, but like needs to accelerate if it's going to live into its valuation. And the growth equity investor is like, sit down, optimize, iterate, improve, cut the highest part of your team and lowest part of your team and stretch the organization forward, take calculated bets. And every single month from January of 2023 to when we raised our Series B, ARR incrementally went up. The mantra of the business was make the graph smile. And it was, the growth rate obviously tanked from close to 300% down to 50%. And the cool thing that we got credit for and why our Series B was really competitive was because we reinflected that growth rate and got it back to triple digits, all while having a fixed cost structure on the business over an 18-month period. And so I attribute that some of that success to fundamental knowledge and understandings that I got from a group of people at HPS Partners on how to work, how to approach the work, how to analyze big strategic decisions. And I carry that with me to today.
I love that, man. It's like the hard decisions that you made combined with like thinking about resource allocation.
Yeah.
Which I think public market investors and later stage investors probably appreciate at a far greater level of detail than early stage investors on average.
Yeah.
That can ultimately make you a much cleaner story around going public and like how you'll trade, but also growing up as a founder and seeing things in a different way than just like what's in front of your face in any given point in time.
I'm excited because Tyler and I are really built for this stage. We've gone through the mud.
How so? How so?
Because this is optimize. This is like build the machine and keep tinkering it, twisting the knobs. And man, are the two of us really built for this.
All right, last question I like to ask every guest. If you were the mayor of New York City for a day, what's one thing that you would change?
I would.
You can have fun with it.
I would put a tax on any San Francisco resident moving to New York where they had to get a 2-year lease in Murray Hill. There'd be housing for San Francisco transplants, and they had to move to Murray Hill for 2 years, and they had to sign the 2-year lease. So you don't have a choice. You got to be there for 2 years, or you lose money. And in the first year, they would hate it and be really challenging. And like far Murray Hill, like not close to the subways. Like they got to walk, they got to live it, they got to like
34th and 1st
for you just in the mix, and like they got to get used to bumping into the sweater vest people who were early analysts. And I hope these people are in their like 30s. That'd be the best. And I would want them to appreciate the battle that is New York every single day and either fall in love with that or leave. And hopefully that would mean like we'd have less bathhouses and we would have less equinoxes and we would have less, whatever Williamsburg has become and the West Village has become, we'd have less of that, and rent would be down, and you might even be able to actually get a reservation at a restaurant because there's not some bot that they put in place, or they're not there at 3:30 waiting in line. And I think that that would breed the best out of New York, which is people who choose every day to be here. And they're not here because it's like exciting and it's this and it's that, but because it's hard and it's challenging and there's great parts about it and there's really shitty parts about it. And they love the like community that you feel when you're here.
I guess we'll get the next mayor to master lease Windsor Court and put all of the folks from SF in there.
Say it's like Marina, those people love the Marina. Just be like, it's like kind of close to the water. There's like bars,
Yeah, I like it.
It'd be great.
I like it.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you joining me, man. This was
Thank
one
you
of the
so
most
much.
fun conversations I've had. So thank you. And, I will go to bed tonight wishing I did not miss air before. And we might have to.
It's my goal. It's my dream. Truly my dream. This is like the fucked up thing that motivates founders in the depths of like the misery. Is I have this image in my head of we're sitting there on Broad Street. It's the IPO offering. And we walk into the building. And this image in my head is like all of the people who said no. Either like people who I was trying to recruit and were like, no, this isn't going anywhere. Or people who try to invest. And it's this image in I know this is really messed up. I get it. But it's this image in my head of like all of them ringing the bell. And I have sent them this like unbelievably nice email about like, thank you so much for like the perspective you've given me over the years. And like, when you told me like, I'm going to pass, but like, how can I be helpful? Like that help was really helpful. And it'd be an honor if you would be like ringing the bell for us. And secretly deep down, I'm like, fuck all of you. In my head, that's burned of like those people ringing that bell. And I would love for you to be there because you've been so helpful. And no,
Given the motivation.
Genuinely, thank you for seriously. You all have done a fantastic job of helping New York feel like it has the right to be the tech ecosystem that it's rapidly growing into. And I'm really long on software companies being built in New York. There's not enough of them. It's really cool to see what Ramp is doing, what Clay is doing as an example. Mm-hmm. To just make that it helps me because there's more people to hire here. And genuinely, for firms like you all and Layer Hippo and folks who've been here for a really long time and new folks like Avenir, it's been amazing to see the ecosystem grow. And genuinely, I'm really, really appreciated for the dinners you all throw, the talks, like it's been really great.
I'm glad that we could give you some motivation. I'm also happy to say that like you and I have had many conversations over the years, like even after I passed. And I think, I hope that I at least treated you well throughout that process to have earned that right.
So you were super helpful.
Somewhere.
Super helpful.
But I think it is also important to say like, we won't be remembered for the deals that we don't do. We will be remembered for the deals that we do.
Yeah.
But I think it's even more important that we do postmortems on the stuff that we don't do.
Yeah.
And that works. And I think one of the nice things about this show, and actually, honestly, like half the guests that I've brought on, it's folks that I met at Seed. But now that I've gotten to know you guys a lot more, and I've gotten to know your businesses a lot more and how I could have looked at it differently, I think it's actually helped me a lot as an investor. Yeah. And so I appreciate you for giving me the time, over the last, it's probably been 5 years since we met. And so thank you for
genuinely thank you all. And I think what you all do is there's a responsibility to it that I feel like you honor, which is an understanding of how deeply personal being a founder and building these kind of businesses are. And if anything, my tension around it is just how deeply personal that sits. And I think great investors like yourself who invest at this stage are really good at identifying that and finding that consistently. It's the heart of what you do. And so very, very appreciative of the years of support.
Well, thanks for joining me, and we'll talk soon.
All right.
Appreciate you carving out a slice of your day to think a little bigger with us. Do me a quick favor, hit follow, drop a 5-star review, and share the episode with one friend who's equally obsessed with building the future. Huge thank you to the team that makes every release sound effortless. Atomic Growth for the behind-the-scenes horsepower, the brilliant Catherine Thayer for steering our editorial compass, and Devin Natoni for getting each episode into your feed right on time. Their work lets me focus on bringing you candid stories and gritty tactics from the founders, operators, and investors rewriting entire industries. Until next time, keep challenging the status quo, and I'll see you on the next change order.